basis today, yeah.
Is the reason that every time there's a revolution or a siege by any particular government, they go after the radio stations first? Shut them down because they're the point of information, or disinformation for that matter.
1949, the FCC feels that it's the government's responsibility to ensure a balance of ideas of broadcast on the limited number of stations. Born from this belief is the Fairness Doctrine. Many felt that the doctrine was an assault on freedom of speech. In 1987, its restrictions on talk radio were finally lifted. The lifting of the doctrine has allowed this industry to flourish. Why then, in this age of internet and cable television, is the ancient format of radio once again under assault? It's time to find out.
My name is Bill Dwight. I broadcast on WHMP on the Bill Dwight Show, cleverly enough.
Sam Fleming, Managing Director of News and Programs at WBUR.
Chuck Morse. I'm the afternoon talk show host at WBNW in Boston.
It was actually just that. It was a doctrine. It wasn't law.
Ironically, it doesn't mean anything anymore because it doesn't exist anymore.
A violation of at least the spirit, if not the actual content of the Constitution of the United States.
It didn't actually become part of the FCC regulations until, I think, in the 70s. But it was 1949 when it was established. And the idea was to create... The notion was noble, was to create balance, because the airwaves, the broadcast airwaves, radio at the time predates television somewhat. The purpose of that was those airwaves belonged to the American public, and therefore the government was supposed to monitor the fairness of it and its service to the United States, the people of the United States.
It used to mean that the airwaves that supposedly the public owns were regulated in some manner to make them balanced. And obviously that ended when the Reagan administration changed the rules. And as I recall, they made the argument at the time that the quantity of stations would just balance themselves out just because of the free market. And I've always felt that that was crazy and it wouldn't happen, and it hasn't.
This is a private company. We have a right here to speak our minds in any way we see fit. The employer here at WBNW hired me to speak my mind on the air. If he doesn't like what I say, get rid of me. It's not up to the government to decide what views are expressed on this station.
Appointed board of FCC had, I think they voted, maybe unanimously, to get rid of the Fairness Doctrine, to no longer qualify that as rules for the FCC. And yeah, it had an impact. I think it had an impact to some extent. I think what had a greater impact, of course, was the deregulating of conglomeration rules that limited conglomeration of media control by one particular entity in any particular market. So what happened was, I think that had a greater impact. But surely, yeah, I would say the Fairness Doctrine certainly relieved broadcasters from the burden of at least trying to give some semblance of fairness or equitable treatment for information.
The broadcast waves, which are licensed, that should be regulated, I think, with some sort of balance. And you know, as long as the airwaves are owned by the public and the Federal Communications Commission is regulating those airwaves, then I believe that there should be balance in place. And I think that not only the proliferation of talk radio, but I used to hire young journalists from other small AM radio stations across the country because it used to be a requirement that stations have news departments and have tried to have forums to discuss issues of importance in any given community, and that regulation went away with the Fairness Doctrine as well, and so there's no need now to have balance. There's no need to have points of view, and so therefore most of those stations don't even have news departments anymore. They've been completely wiped out, and I now have to hire people out of college or out of print because the small radio stations don't have news departments anymore. the communities, I think, the communities are now lacking in public discussions within their community in ways I think that was a huge role of radio, just 10 years ago, and especially 20 years ago, in places like Boston or in tiny towns like Dover, New Hampshire, or Concord, New Hampshire.
Well, they are public domains in that we have to maintain community standards. You can't use George Carlin's famous 7 bad words. You have to basically tailor your conversation to suit the values of a community within a pretty broad parameter. But what that did not mean was that the government could come in and actually regulate what opinions are expressed, what political ideas are expressed on the air. It has more to do with both the community standards and also making announcements for the community on community-related matters, which is something that we do.
Well, it depends on what you mean by regulation. If you mean by regulating the Fairness Doctrine, first of all, radio is regulated out the wazoo because, and as all broadcasts, television air broadcast and radio broadcasts are regulated. Censorship is a classic example. A wardrobe malfunction. I mean, I think those are more asinine in some respect than even the Fairness Doctrine. I think the Fairness Doctrine, what's expected from it is absurd to try and achieve. And so it's absurd to actually enforce it by regulation. I think it's also absurd to enforce censorship rules. But I think there should be some government regulation associated with broadcasts, but I don't think it should be censorship, and I don't think it should be associated with censorship. I think it should, as I said, I think it should be more focused on ownership and fairness of ownership, because this is not an entitlement. It's not it is a marketable commodity, but it starts with its main purpose is to serve the people who own it, which is you and me, theoretically.
There should be a requirement to try and be a vehicle for the community in which that license is granted. And if there's the Fairness Doctrine used to require that. And I have a theory that the reason it was the reason they got rid of it was because of the obviously the Reagan administration at that time believed in free enterprise, and it fit in with, I think, the philosophy of at the time of the Reagan administration. But at the same time, I think the lobby of the National Association of Broadcasters is and was a very powerful lobby that was able to slowly over time dilute and ultimately get rid of the Fairness Doctrine.
And it made conservative radio take off like a rocket. And the reason conservative radio took off like a rocket is because people want to hear it. It resonates, and advertisers therefore are willing to spend money running ads on a radio station that has ratings, and it's free. It's an expression of freedom. It's not a matter of whether liberals can be on the air. They can be, but just like anyone else, they have to compete on the open market so a radio station can make a profit and sell advertising. And if you get a good liberal talk show host who can do that, they're going to be welcome on the air. I mean, the radio station will put a monkey on the air if they think they can get advertising.
I think conservative radio appealed to one specific market that's the demographic that most people try to appeal to. It's males, white males, between 18 and 45. And this is a target market to politically appeal to people who, for lack of a better term, had this kind of anger and resentment build up with, it was the angry middle-class, middle-aged white guy. He was ticked off about having to be conscientious of women's issues and issues of other races and things like that, and Rush Limbaugh filled the need. It kind of touched Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, right-wing radio in itself, touched on a lot of antipathies and festering